Hello, welcome to Bible Study Time and welcome to my Quiet Time Bible Study. For those of you who are new, my Hebrew name is Ahava, which is back there on the wall, and Ahava means love in Hebrew. That's how you say one of the ways you say love in the Hebrew language. So this week we are going to begin a new Bible study series focusing on one of the books from the Apocrypha, and I'm going to be reading from the New Oxford Annotated Bible. And the book we're going to be reading is called The Wisdom of Solomon. And as some of you may know, I am so excited to read this book because, I am a fan of the Apocrypha, particularly because it's something kind of new to me in my adulthood, as I did not grow up in a religious organization that actually included those books in the Bible. Okay, so as I've previously mentioned, the Apocrypha is found in the 1611 King James Bible. So before we get into this read-along series, I just wanted to talk about a little bit of history regarding the book, The Wisdom of Solomon. But first, let's begin with discussing the Apocrypha. So, Apocrypha, from Greek, apocryphian, means to hide away. In biblical literature, works outside on accepted canon or outside on or in an accepted canon, of scripture. So it means to kind of like hide away. That's what the word apocrypha means, and it comes from, its origin is Greek. The history of the term's usage indicates that it referred to a body of esoteric writings that were at first prized, later tolerated, and finally excluded. In its broadest sense, Apocrypha has come to mean any writings of dubious authority. There are several levels of dubiety within the general concept of apocryphal works in Judeo-Christian biblical writings. Apocrypha per se are outside the canon, not considered divinely inspired, but regarded as worthy of study by the faithful. And I do encourage any of you who are interested in the apocryphal books to engage in your own personal research. Then we have pseudepigrapha. Pseudepigrapha are spurious works ostensibly written by a biblical figure. And then we have deuterocanonical books. And deuterocanonical works are those that are accepted in one canon, but not accepted in all of them. So at the time when Greek was the common spoken language in the Mediterranean region, the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, was incomprehensible to most of the population. For this reason, Jewish scholars produced the Septuagint, which is a translation of the Old Testament books from various Hebrew texts, along with fragments in Aramaic into Greek. Okay, so they translated them into Greek. So that version incorporated a number of works that later non-Hellenistic Jewish scholarship at the Council of Jamnia, which took place in AD 90, identified as being outside the authentic Hebrew canon. The Septuagint was an important basis for St. Jerome's translation of the Old Testament into Latin for the Vulgate Bible. And although he, Jerome, had doubts about the authenticity of some of the apocryphal works that it contained, scholars believed that he was actually overruled, and most of them were then included in the Vulgate. history, when we look at like the history of the canon and things of that nature, and I'm just sort of summarizing here. On April 8th, 1546, the Council of Trent declared that the canonicity of nearly the entire Vulgate, excluding only the 3rd and 4th books of Maccabees, the Prayer of Manasseh, Psalm 151, and the 1st and 2nd books of Esdras, Eastern Christendom, meanwhile, had accepted some of the Old Testament Apocrypha, okay, which included things like Tobit, Judith, the Wisdom of Solomon, which is why I'm reading all of this history, and Ecclesiasticus, also referred to as the Wisdom of Sirach. But they rejected the rest. There are other apocryphal writings to consider that the Catholic Church, the Roman Catholic Church, considers, and many Hebrew Israelite groups, with an exemption of 2 or so. A lot of these books include, but are not limited to, the book of Baruch, who was a prophet, and the letter of Jeremiah, the 1st and 2nd book of Maccabees, several stories from Daniel, namely the Song of the Three, Susanna, and Bel and the Dragon, and extensive portions of the book of Esther. And in many apocryphal Bibles, it's referred to as the rest of Esther. Now, Old Testament pseudepigrapha are extremely numerous and offer accounts of patriarchs and events attributed to various biblical personages from Adam to Zechariah. Some of the most significant of these works are the Ascension of Isaiah, the Assumption of Moses, the Life of Adam and Eve, the 1st and 2nd books of Enoch, the book of Jubilees, the letter of Artaxerxes, and the testaments of the 12 prophets. All the New Testament Apocrypha are pseudepigraphal, and most of them fall into the categories of Acts, Gospels, and Epistles, though there are a number of apocalypses, and some can be characterized as wisdom books. The apocryphal acts purport to relate the lives or careers of various biblical figures, including most of the apostles, the epistles, gospels, and others, and these are ascribed to such figures. Some relate encounters and events in mystical language and describe arcane rituals. Most of these works arose from sects that had been or would be declared heretical, such as the Gnostics. Some of them argued against various heresies, and a few appeared to have been neutral efforts to popularize the life of some saint or other early leader of the church, including a number of women. In the early decades of Christianity, no orthodoxy had been established, and various parties or factions were actually vying for like ascendancy and regularity in the young church. So there's kind of like a competition going on. All sought through their writings as through their preaching and missions to win believers. In this setting, virtually all works advocating beliefs that later became heretical were destined to denunciation and also to destruction. In addition to apocryphal works, the New Testament includes a number of works and fragments that are described by a second meaning of the term deuterocanonical, added later. That's what it means, added later. Such as the letter to the Hebrews attributed to Paul, who many scholars believe died before it was written, and this is one of these. Others are the letters of James, 2 Peter, and 2nd and 3rd John and Jude, and the Revelation to John. Fragments include Mark chapter 16, verses 9 to 20, Luke 22, 43 to 44, and John 7, 53 and 8, 1 to 11, which are included in the Roman canon and are accepted by the Eastern Church and most Protestant churches. Heretical movements such as Gnosticism and monasticism spawned a great body of New Testament pseudepigraphy. pseudepigrapha. The existence of such purported scriptures lent great impetus to the process of canonization in the young and Orthodox Christian Church. Now let's get to the Wisdom of Solomon. The Wisdom of Solomon, an example of the wisdom genre of religious literature which commends a life of introspection and reflection on human existence, especially from an ethical perspective, is an apocryphal work, but interestingly is included in the Septuagint, which is, as I previously mentioned, the Greek translation of the Old Testament, and it was accepted in the Roman Catholic canon. In the book, wisdom is depicted as a feminine personification of an attribute of God. She is a breath of the power of God and a clear effluence of the glory of the Most High. There are many different groups who believe different things, and some believe that wisdom was part of the Most High Creator God and is the Holy Spirit through Ruach HaKodesh, not like a female, but the feminine essence of God that he pulled out of himself. Maybe I'll do a Bible study about that one day. Continuing on, written by a Jew in Alexandria, speaking of the Wisdom of Solomon, written by a Jew in Alexandria sometime during the 1st century BC, this is what scholars believe, the book was in effect a defense of Judaism. For in describing Jewish doctrines in terms of Hellenistic philosophy, it showed that philosophical truths were applicable to the Jewish concept of God. Its argument was perhaps directed both to Jews who, responding to their non-Jewish environment, had apostatized and adopted pagan gods, and rigorous Jews who, in the same environment, advocated complete religious and social isolation. The first of the book's 3 sections is written in poetic form and is concerned with fostering enthusiasm for religious belief and practice, with emphasis on the superiority of belief over impiety. The second, mixing poetry and prose, praises wisdom. The third, likewise, a mixture of poetic and prose styles, attempts to prove that wisdom has guided all of Israelite history. And this third section, also condemns idol worship. The original text was most probably written in Greek, as I mentioned, and how do we know this? Because fragments were discovered in the Essene Library at Qumran in Palestine, the Qumran caves. Many scholars believe that the author's prime literary source of this Wisdom of Solomon was the Septuagint, and so many scholars, biblical scholars, believe and agree upon that. In particular, the wisdom literature and also the book of Isaiah. Okay? And they also talk about how the way that this book is written was very familiar to, according to some scholars, very familiar to the book of Enoch, and also familiar to Greek philosophical literature. It is certain whether the book has a single author or comes from a school of writers. It's uncertain, whether the book has a single author or comes from a school of writers. So there is a debate about whether one individual has written the Wisdom of Solomon or whether a lot of people have written it. But recent scholarship has favored regarding it as a unified body of work in some way. In either case, its blend of Greek and Jewish features suggests a learned Hellenistic background, and despite the address to the rulers of the world, the actual audience were probably members of the author's own Hebraic community who were tempted to give up their heritage, customs, and belief systems in the face of the temptations of Greek culture and the hostile conditions facing them in the Greek world. So that's a little bit of the history. As I mentioned, I do encourage you to, research it on your own. Most of my research came from the Encyclopedia Britannica and different encyclopedias. So that being said, let's get into reading this book in the Apocrypha, referred to as the Wisdom of Solomon. And so I am using the New Oxford Annotated Bible. I know some of you have mentioned that you do have it. So if you do have it, I need my light because it's dark here and it's extremely late because I just finished teaching an evening class. If any of you do have this the New Annotated Oxford Bible, it's a revised standard version with the Apocrypha. I'm going to begin reading in chapter number 1, and I'm on page number 1451. Okay, the Wisdom of Solomon. And it reads, "Love righteousness, you rulers of the earth. Think of the Lord in goodness and seek him with sincerity of heart, because he is found by those who do not put him to the test, and manifests himself to those who do not distrust him. For perverse thoughts separate people from God, and when his power is tested, it exposes the foolish. Because wisdom will not enter a deceitful soul, or dwell in a body enslaved to sin. For a holy and disciplined spirit will flee from deceit, and will leave foolish thoughts behind, and will be ashamed at the approach of unrighteousness. For wisdom is a kindly spirit, but will not free blasphemers from the guilt of their words. Because God is witness of their innermost feelings, and a true observer of their hearts, and a hearer of their tongues. Because the Spirit of the Lord has filled the world, and that which holds all things together knows what is said. Therefore, those who utter unrighteous things will not escape notice, and justice, when it punishes, will not pass them by. For iniquity will be made into the counsels of the ungodly, and a report of their words will come to the Lord, to convict them of their lawless deeds. Because a jealous ear hears all things, and the sound of grumbling does not go unheard. Beware then of useless grumbling, and keep your tongue from slander, because no secret word is without result, and a lying mouth destroys the soul. Do not invite death by the error of your life, or bring on destruction by the works of your hands, because God did not make death, and he does not delight in the death of the living. For he created all things so that they might exist. The generative forces of the world are wholesome, and there is no destructive poison in them, and the dominion of Hades is not on earth. For righteousness is immortal, but the ungodly by their words and deeds summoned death. Considering him a friend, they pined away and made a covenant with him, because they are fit to belong to his company. Continuing on to chapter 2. For they reasoned unsoundly, saying to themselves, "Short and sorrowful is our life, and there is no remedy when a life comes to its end. And no one has been known to return from Hades, for we were born by mere chance, and hereafter we shall be as though we had never been. For the breath in our nostrils is smoke, and the reason is a spark kindled by the beating of our hearts. When it is extinguished, the body will turn to ashes, and the spirit will dissolve like empty air. Our name will be forgotten in time, and no one will remember our works. Our life will pass away like the traces of a cloud, and be scattered like mist that is chased by the rays of the sun and overcome by its heat. For our allotted time is the passing of a shadow, and there is no return from our death, because it is sealed up, and no one turns back. Come, therefore, let us enjoy the good things that exist, and make use of the creation to the full, as in youth. Let us take our fill of costly wine and perfumes, and let no flower of spring pass us by. Let us crown ourselves with rosebuds before they wither. Let none of us fail to share in our revelry everywhere. Let us leave signs of enjoyment, because this is our portion and this is our lot. Let us possess the righteous poor man. Let us not spare the widow, or regard the gray hairs of the aged. But let our might be our law of right, for what is weak proves itself to be useless. Let us lie in wait for the righteous man, because he is inconvenient to us and opposes our actions. He reproaches us for sins against the law, and accuses us of sins against our training. He professes to have knowledge of God and calls himself a child of the Lord. He became to us a reproof of our thoughts. The very sight of him is a burden to us, because his manner of life is unlike that of others, and his ways are strange. We are considered by him as something base, and he avoids our ways as unclean. He calls the last end of the righteous happy, and boasts that God is his Father. Let us see if his words are true, and let us test what will happen at the end of his life. For if the righteous man is God's child, he will help him, and will deliver him from the hand of his adversaries. Let us test him with insult and torture, so that we may find out how gentle he is, and make trial of his forbearance. Let us condemn him to a shameful death, for according to what he says, he will be protected. Thus they reasoned, but they were led astray, for their wickedness blinded them. And they did not know the secret purposes of God, nor hoped for the wages of holiness, nor discerned the prize for blameless souls. For God created us for incorruption, and made us in the image of his own eternity. But through the devil's envy, death entered the world, and those who belong to his company experience it. Continuing on to chapter number 3, verse 1. But the souls of the righteous are in the hand of God, and no torment will ever touch them. In the eyes of the foolish, they seem to have died, and their departure was thought to be a disaster, and their going from us to be their destruction, but they are at peace. For though in the sight of others they were punished, their hope is full of immortality. Having been disciplined a little, they will receive great good, because God tested them and found them worthy of himself. Like gold in the furnace he tried them, and like a sacrificial burnt offering he accepted them. In the time of their visitation they will shine forth, and will run like sparks through the stubble. They will govern nations and rule over peoples, and the Lord will reign over them forever. Those who trust in him will understand truth, and the faithful will abide with him in love, because grace and mercy are upon his holy ones, and he watches over his elect. But the ungodly will be punished as their reasoning deserves. Those who disregarded the righteous and rebelled against the Lord. For those who despise wisdom and instruction are miserable. Their hope is vain, their labors are unprofitable, and their works are useless. Their wives are foolish and their children evil. Their offspring are accursed. For blessed is the barren woman who is undefiled, who has not entered into a sinful union. She will have fruit when God examines souls. Blessed also is the eunuch whose hands have done no lawless deed, and who has not devised wicked things against the Lord. For special favor will be shown him for his faithfulness, and a place of great delight in the temple of the Lord. For the fruit of good labors is renowned, and the root of understanding does not fail. But children of adulterers will not come to maturity, and the offspring of an unlawful union will perish. Even if they live long, they will be held of no account, and finally their old age will be without honor. If they die young, they will have no hope and no consolation on the day of judgment, for the end of an unrighteous generation is grievous. And that brings me to the end of chapter number 3 in the book, The Wisdom of Solomon. And I'm so grateful to the Most High Creator God for guiding me, and the Ruach HaKodesh guiding me into all truth, and the Most High for guiding me to review, this book, The Wisdom of Solomon, once more. I don't know if you guys can see it, but I love reading out loud. I feel like, when you actually read out loud, the words tend to sort of land deeper in the brain. I don't know, that's like my own personal theory, but I know that we are building neurons and creating those neural pathways. So I'm grateful to God for that. I do find joy in reading the scriptures. I'm not sure if you can see that it's written all over my face. I want to thank you guys for coming with me on this journey, my personal journey of spiritual growth. And for those of you who have messaged me and who are interested in the Apocrypha, I hope that you do continue to join me on this read-along series where we just read through this apocryphal book that many of us have never sort of heard of before. And before I say goodbye, I want to remind you that the Most High Creator God of the universe, who sent his Son, Yeshua HaMashiach, to die for all of our sins, loves his children.